Welcome to Kick Back with Chris. Kick Back with Chris, the martial arts podcast.
Brought to you by www.mittmaster.com.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Kick Back with Chris, the martial arts podcast. I hope you're all well. So here we are with our special on Mark Dacascos. It's one that I've been planning. It's been in the pipeline now for a while. But before we get to that, I just wanted to do, a little bit of housekeeping, I guess, really. So our last episode, we had our Jean-Claude Van Damme special. And, it kind of took off. It kind of went a little bit crazy. Obviously, those of you that have been following the podcast for a while now will know that, I have a love for martial arts in general, whether it's as my job as an instructor, whether it's trying to make a career as a performer in films, whether it's just training myself. I have a general all-round love for martial arts. And when I posted the episode for Jean-Claude Van Damme last time around, I wasn't expecting him to share it on his page. What I would like to say is thank you to all the new listeners, and welcome to all the new listeners that have joined us as a result of him sharing last week's episode. But wow, I mean, what a crazy couple of weeks it has been as a result, in a positive way, obviously, but I guess I want to say welcome to all the new listeners. So in this week's episode, as you'll know, as has been advertised on social media, this episode is dedicated to Mr. Mark Dacascos and his work within the martial arts and movies. And I think the best way to start this off probably is explaining maybe a little bit as to why I've decided this. So going back a while now, going back to the sort of mid-1990s, I'd begun training again in martial arts, having had taken a little bit of a break through my sort of early teens. And I'd worked my way through the grades, as we all do, dedicated myself completely and wholly to martial arts at the time. I was training 6 days a week most weeks. I was spending more time in the martial arts gym training than I was with my friends and family. I guess the fellow students to a point did become my friends and family for a while, because I was just there all the time. I was completely hooked. Now, around this sort of time, the late 90s, I'd actually began being more involved with the school that I was training at as an instructor. And I was still heavily into my training, and it was sort of around that time there was the internet became something that was more readily available, more easily. Well, I say easily, not very easily by today's standards, but it was more easily accessible at the time. And we were starting to come across these videos of people performing all these fantastic techniques. We weren't always able to put names to what these techniques were, and keeping in mind, I was a young boy growing up in South Yorkshire in the UK, and so we were pretty sheltered with regards to our exposure to martial arts. Really, all we saw was what we would come across on television and films, and most of the time, names of styles and systems weren't put to those techniques that we were seeing. So, we were finding these techniques on the internet, and then, we were going into the gym. What I would do is I would transfer them onto VHS, for those of you that remember VHS, and we would play them on a big TV screen in the gym that was fitted. The screen was actually in there for promotional reasons for the parents, but I would sneak swap the tapes around, and we'd watch these martial arts techniques on loop and try to copy them. And this one particular time, one of the older students walked in whilst myself and a couple of the other kids, I say kids, they're now in their 30s, and one of them is actually quite a successful stuntman, but we'll get to that another day. We were attempting some techniques, and he walked in and he said, "Hey guys, have you seen a film called Only the Strong?" And we were like, no, not seen that. He said, "Oh, well, the weekend, come round to my house and we'll watch it." So we were like, yeah, okay, cool. So what we didn't realise was we were actually copying, attempting to emulate capoeira techniques that we'd found on a popular tricking website at the time called Bilang, or Bilang, however you want to say it, Bilang.com. And we had no idea what we were doing, really. We were just trying to copy them, and obviously he'd seen them and then noticed that they were similar to the techniques that Mark and the other actors and performers were demonstrating in the film when they were strong. And the weekend came, we went along, we sat down. He actually had it was an imported VHS version, and because there wasn't actually a UK release at the time, so he had was it NTSC, I believe it was, or maybe it's the other way around, but anyway, it was an American release, and we sat down and we were just utterly mesmerized. We were like, these are the things that we've been trying to do. Anyway, I searched like crazy to find a copy of the film, and I couldn't find it anywhere. And then I can't remember when it was. It was a short time later. There was a VHS release became available, so that became our new video that we would play in the martial arts studio as teenagers. Trying to copy these techniques, and for the most part, we got most of them down. Obviously, some of it was a little bit difficult because, obviously the way that films are put together, you don't always get to see a nice wide shot of the technique. So a lot of it was guesswork. But the various different techniques we worked out until we got them, and then we would start putting them into our forms at competition, and much simpler days. And then obviously following from that, it was a name that I started to look for, and we, as many people did, we discovered Drive, and then Brotherhood of the Wolf, and so on from there. I remember being particularly excited about seeing that he was going to be in Martial Law, because that was one of the there was 2 TV shows on that I would alternate between recording, because obviously it's VHS days. We couldn't, you couldn't just set your DVR or whatever to record 3 or 4 different shows. You had to pick and choose. And over here at that time, Martial Law was shown at the same time as I believe it was the Mortal Kombat TV series. And so I was having to say, well, pick or choose which, and obviously I was training, so I couldn't be at home. I had to be training. So I had to pick and choose which to record. And I remember being particularly excited about that episode. And simpler times. So on to what we're going to be doing in this show now that I've just spent 5 minutes talking about my old times training. What we're going to be doing, then, for those of you that are new to the show, what I'm going to do is play to you a selection of clips from people that have submitted over this last sort of 3-week period. I invited people via social media to send in their thoughts and memories, shall we say, of Mark's films and how he's influenced them and how those films have influenced them and shaped their careers. I've also reached out to people, mutual friends within the industry, people that have worked with him, people that work in the industry that have been influenced by his work, and hopefully, by the end of the show, you'll have a better idea or more of an insight into Mark as an individual. So the first recording we're going to go to is from Mr. Mike Moeller, a German martial artist and actor, fantastically talented individual, somebody that I've connected with via social media. One of the cool things that social media is good for. I've been a long-time follower of his work. If you've not checked out his stuff, go to Facebook and have a look at it. But yeah, let's have a listen to Mike's thoughts, and I'll catch you after that.
Hey guys, Mike Möller here. Just want to share a few words about one of the best in the business, Mr. Mark Dacascos. I had the pleasure and honor to work with Mark on the movie Ultimate Justice a few years ago. I've been a fan since I saw Only the Strong in the early 90s, and besides this, Crying Freeman and Drive are my absolute favorites. The first time I met Mark was during the prep for Ultimate Justice, and I was very impressed by this down-to-earth, humble, and so talented man. And most important, he's really a nice guy. He really is. Working with him was a gift. He was always professional and friendly to everyone. His fighting skills were still great, and his acting was even better. I mean, just look at John Wick 3. Amazing. I wish him all the best in the future, especially that he gets a main part in a big budget movie. He really deserves it. So, that's from my side. Greetings from Germany. Mikey out. Bye-bye.
So big thanks to Mike for sending that over. I appreciate your time and effort to do that. One of the things that I've noticed through speaking to mutual friends, through other people in the industry, is there's this overriding theme of how much of a nice guy Mark is. Now, what I will say before we go any further is I haven't met him. I don't know him. But we do have a lot of, well, not a lot, but we do have some mutual friends. And, you know, the thing that I've heard from all of them is how much of a nice, decent, down-to-earth guy he is. And I'm sure that's going to be a theme that's going to pop up again later in some of the other recordings. But just to touch on a couple of the films there that Mike mentioned, obviously Drive. I think that's, I think it's fair to say that is going to be a film that is going to be heavily mentioned in the other recordings that have come in as well, and rightly so as well. I remember watching it at the time when it came out and being absolutely blown away by it. You know, not only the martial arts scenes, but the acting, the comedy, it was such a good fun film. You know, just a quality fun film, but with top level action in there as well. Obviously Koichi Sakamoto and Alpha Stunts, and you know, I again, this was one of the films that I was constantly going back to, revisiting, and even now, you know, some of my students that are coming through will sometimes will organise movie nights and things, charity movie nights, and you know, Drive's one of those films that I do feature, and the total look of astonishment, the mesmerised looks on their faces when they see this film, it is one of those quality go-to films that tends to pop up on lists. You know, you'll tend to have people who will mention certain films. They'll say, "Oh, you've got to make sure you must see Drunken Master 2, and you must see this, and you must see that," and then Drive is always on that list. Obviously, as well, John Wick 3, more recent film, absolutely fantastic, and actually one that I am going to touch on a little bit later on. So our next recording comes from William, somebody that I've connected with on social media again many years ago. He actually reminded me in this recording of how we connected, and you know, as we all have busy lives, and when he reminded me of this, it was like, oh wow, yeah, I do remember that now. But anyway, we'll go to William's recording, and then I'll come back to you on the other side.
Hey Chris, it's William Joseph Hill, all the way from Hollywood, California. Man, we go way back, I think to 2002, 2003. You interviewed me for KungFuCinema.com for a script that I had written, a film called She-Ra the Vampire Samurai. We're talking about Mark Dacascos. Man, he's been around forever. Now, I'm from Hawaii too, and he's of course from Hawaii, and his father's like legendary. His father, Al Dacascos, was like well known. I think his family's originated in like Kajukembo, or one of those eclectic styles that's very popular in the islands. Never had the chance to actually meet him yet or work with him, but I know people who know people or know people who've worked with him, and he's just awesome, amazing. His artistry's fantastic, but you know, I think when we think about like quintessential Mark Dacascos movies, of course, most of us will think of Double Dragon, especially those of us raised on scrolling video games like me and that, like Nintendo and whatnot. But that's a classic. That's a classic in the martial arts realm and stuff. But the one's most memorable moment of mine is from his film Only the Strong, the Capoeira movie. Of course, there's the schoolyard and the kids have got the music, and he's playing like a substitute teacher. You know, they think, oh, he's a disciplinarian, and he comes up to them and he's like, hey, turn that music up. And of course, they crank it, and then he throws down some capoeira. So it's kind of like a martial arts capoeira style beat street or break-in, which I'm an 80s b-boy, so I totally appreciated that. And it was kind of like, oh, break-in's not dead. That's the quintessential moment that when I think of like, oh yeah, Mark Dacascos from Only the Strong. But my latest experience has been getting to see John Wick 3 on the airplane coming back from a wedding. And that was incredible. The fights and the action in that's incredible. But Mark, especially, his fight scene with Keanu is like, I mean, that's a masterclass in choreography, in cinematic fighting, in action, in brutality. I mean, it's everything. It's so realistic and so gritty and raw. It's just like, wow, so impressed with that. So, yeah, I do aspire to get a chance to work with him in the future. Incidentally, it's funny because like I still write. I'm getting ready to release my sci-fi martial arts action novel Cyber Fighter on Amazon and Amazon Kindle, coming out in November 2019. It'd be great to get him in that if we ever make the movie. But anyway, love these podcasts. This is fantastic to hear from everybody's contributions, everybody's connections to these people and these martial artists who've influenced us. Because let's face it, those of us who are in the martial arts, when we go and we train and we go to the movies to be entertained, and we're always like, that's part of what inspires us to keep going or to keep trying to better ourselves, because we see them do a fantastic move, a fantastic sequence, and we're like, oh man, I got to get that good. So, and Mark Dacascos is one of those martial artists that I aspire to be just like. I mean, I can't be just like him because the way he moves is poetry, but it's inspirational. So anyway, aloha, and as we say, like in Honolulu, it would be laters. But anyway, yeah, from Hollywood, Chris, great podcast. Enjoying these a lot. Thanks so much, man.
Thanks, William. Great recording. Thanks for sending that in. Just picking up on what you were saying at the end there about being inspired by Mark and other actors within the martial arts movie industry. It's so true. It's so true. And I'm sure they fully appreciate this. But, myself, especially, and I know this of other people as well, we have those days of self-doubt and, can I go far in this industry? Can I keep going the way I'm going? Can I keep training as hard as I'm training? And then you go into these films and you see these people doing the things that they're doing, and it inspires you to keep pushing and to keep going. So I fully echo what you're saying there and agree with you. Now, on the subject of John Wick 3, which you brought up during the recording, the character of Zero, for me, an absolute fantastic character. What I really loved about him was, and I must say, there's little, I recognise little bits of myself in that character as well, and I'm sure other people do as well. It's super serious about the training and super serious about the job and the profession, but at the same time, a complete and utter martial arts geek, and in the case of the character Zero, completely obsessed with John Wick. And I loved those moments of the clarity in the moments of the action and the focus and the single-mindedness, the need to do the job to 100%. And then in the downtime, turning into this complete and utter John Wick geek, the super fan that knows everything about everything, desperate to sit next to him and ask his, to get his, approval, so to speak. And I thought that was a really cool and a really clever decision with this character. And I think, Mark really did the character justice. To go from those moments, those extremes of, the sort of the sharp intake of breath during the action, thinking, the violence, the aggressiveness of it, to then go completely the opposite to that, turning into this almost sort of childlike. It's just the raw excitement. He's getting to meet his hero. I've been in that position before, and it is difficult. You're on set and you're meeting somebody that you've watched on TV for years, and they're right in front of you, and you're trying to keep yourself professional, but the complete geek inside of you is having a complete freak out. So next we're going to take a recording from a good friend of mine, somebody who's submitted before into the show, a fantastic UK-based martial artist and actor, Mr. Lee Charles.
Hi guys, Lee Charles here again, putting my little bit in for the Mark Dacascos podcast. I was first introduced to Mark, I don't know, probably like Double Dragon, remember Double Dragon? Watching that, thinking this guy's amazing. Obviously, Only the Strong, which everyone was introduced to, and where capoeira was introduced to the world. Obviously, being in the martial arts, I knew about capoeira before it. But the ultimate movie for me, in terms of Mark Dacascos movies, has to be, well, there's two actually. Drive, which is just absolutely phenomenal, and one of my all-time favourite movies of all time, Brotherhood of the Wolf. Brotherhood of the Wolf, for me, is near perfect as a movie. So yeah. What can you say about Mark Dacascos? Just phenomenal. Bigger star than what he is, in my mind. One of the top martial arts superstars, martial arts action stars, and is absolutely phenomenal at what he does. It was great to see him, obviously, in John Wick 3. It was good to see him on screen in Hawaii 5-0. this guy is just absolutely amazing. The Crow TV series, you could go on forever. For me, though, it has to be Drive for its groundbreaking, action scenes and everything else, and for performance, Brotherhood of the Wolf. Take care, guys. Speak to you soon.
Big thank you, Lee, for that. I know you're a busy guy, and I know I only just asked you for the previous podcast, but you've come through as always, and I really do appreciate it, mate. So, yeah, I completely agree with what you were saying on there. And interesting enough, you mentioned Hawaii 5-0, and I was mentioning this to a friend actually the other day. Hawaii 5-0. That's kind of like there's a few TV shows that both myself and my wife will agree to sit down and watch together, and that's one of them. We actually, it was actually we've watched it since the first episode from the first series. When it first launched, I was like, I'm going to give this a go. I'm going to watch, and at the time I was watching it, and my wife came in, and she's like, "Oh, you're watching one of your TV shows." And basically, what she means by that is, by one of my TV shows, it usually involves something science fiction or something with fighting in it. And she sat down and watched it with me, and then it's kind of turned into that TV show that we watched together. Little insight into my family life there, but no, the character of Wo Fat is, I mean, first of all, when I found out that Mark was going to be in this series, obviously being a fan of his prior to the series, I was so super excited for that. And then finding out that obviously he was going to be a bad guy, it's like, this is really, really cool. When the character was killed off, it was one of those really odd moments for me, because the character, I mean, personified evil, really. And Mark played it really, the bad guy, really, really well. Just the intensity in his eyes was just, you just can't even describe it, really. But when the character was killed off, it was a really difficult one for me, because it was one of those characters that you loved to hate, but you didn't want them to not be in the show anymore. So you were kind of like, I really want Wo Fat to die because he's not a nice person. I won't use bad language, but at the same time, I really didn't want him to be killed off, because I really enjoyed him being in the series. I'm sure people that watched it will know what I mean, but yeah, such a great character. And obviously the other things you mentioned, Brotherhood of the Wolf, especially. I know the one particular scene where the character's introduced, when Manny's introduced, and Mark jumps down from the horse and his feet hit the ground with that big thud. You think, this is going to kick off. This is going to be good. So, really, really, some good shouts there, Lee. Thanks for submitting. Okay, so our next recording comes from Raf, who reached out to me over Facebook. He's all the way over in Adelaide in South Australia. Okay, so we'll check this one out, and I'll be back to you on the other side.
Hi, Chris. This is Raf. I'm super excited that you're going to have Mark Dacascos on the show. I just remember, when I was a kid and I saw Crying Freeman for the first time, and I saw him do the barrel roll. And I was like, man, I have to learn how to do that. So I just practiced relentlessly until I could do it. And he's a massive inspiration to me as a martial artist when I was growing up. And it was awesome to recently watch him on the big screen in John Wick 3. I thought he was amazing in it. So can't wait to hear the podcast. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks for that, Raf. This is one of the really cool things that I enjoy about this podcast is, getting in touch with people never spoken to before, from all corners of the world. Here's me sat in the UK listening to an audio clip sent in by a listener from Australia, from the other side of the world. It's crazy, all brought together by the common theme of love for martial arts, and in this particular case, as followers of Mark Dacascos' work. So, yeah, just going back to what you were saying there with regards to the techniques, the barrel roll, I believe, terminology is going to differ from place to place, but if it's the technique I'm thinking of in Crying Freeman, I believe it's what I call the butterfly twist, which is one of those techniques that, this is going to sound ridiculous, but when you know how to do it, it's really easy, but when you don't understand it, it's an absolute nightmare. I remember spending ridiculous amounts of time literally drilling myself into the floor trying to get this one right. Again, it's one of those funny ones where if you use the sort of mental safety net of a crash mat, it's not to say that it's easy, but you sometimes you can become reliant on it, and then the minute that mat's not there, it feels like you're jumping over a pit of spikes trying to land it. But yeah, I remember learning that one. Then I remember having to try and modify it for sort of more film use. Being that, generally speaking, myself anyway, we usually used it as a reaction. A spin out, and so then you had to sort of get over you'd spend all the time learning to land it on your feet, or 1 foot first, and then you had to not put your feet down, which was, again, it was a little bit of a mental hurdle, but great fun times. My elbows and knees and lower back are a little bit less happy about performing it these days, but still giving it a go. But with regards to, actually, I mentioned this earlier on in the show. It was after, when we'd seen only the strong, we'd try techniques. One of the techniques in particular that we were trying to do, again, terminology differs from place to place, but was what we would call the Albertito. In the tournament scene, it was sometimes called the L kick, or I believe it was Amazonica, or anyway, whatever it was, the one where you're doing like a handstand kick. And anybody that's tried that out there will understand when I say the amount of times you either fall on your face, your elbow buckles, and you sort of fall on the side of your head, or the really embarrassing one sometimes when you sort of overcommit to it and you end up sort of kneeing yourself in the side of the face. But it's one of those really cool kicks that when you get it, it feels so cool when you get it, and you can get so many cool photos. I have hundreds of those photos from, back in my sort of early 20s when I was doing this one on a constant basis. Sorry if you can hear that in the background. I've just taken my watch off and I'm getting loads of notifications from people. But yes, such a pro. But yeah, the Albertino, that was one that I still have a go at every now and again. Still throw it just to see if I can still do it. It impresses the kids in the classes. And it's nice to know that I can still throw it every once in a while. Okay, so the next clip we're going to go to is another friend of mine from within the martial arts industry, Mr. Ray Heeks.
Hi Chris, I finally got round to doing a voice clip for you about your podcast on Mark Dacascos. Myself, probably like a lot of other people, have been quite thrilled to be seeing Mark in Wu Assassins. And I've followed Mark Dacascos for quite a long time. Been quite an influence in my life. Probably passed on through one of my students in particular, who was quite enamoured with seeing Mark Dacascos in Only the Strong. Took up capoeira and had a maestro in Manchester, and he in turn actually showed me how to do some capoeira. I quite enjoy having a bit of a dabble in different martial arts and learning things from my students as they learn things as well. I quite like encouraging my students to go off and learn new things and show me some new stuff, because I'm being a family guy, not a lot of time to go all over the place like I used to do when I was a lot younger, and certainly didn't have the money when I was younger. So now I'm depleting in a different way, which is with time. So I suppose in a way I'll live out things that my students learn. I'll learn what they actually get off of people, and I enjoy learning as much as I can and going different places as much as I can. But obviously, if you can pick something up off your students that they pick up, then that's even a bonus, isn't it? But I think the thing that appealed to me with capoeira and some of the other things I picked up along the way from students and watching Mark Dacascos movies, and along with a lot of other film stars, I suppose, is when you're actually watching the movie and you've learned some of the moves, you can actually put a name to the move. So when you see in a Kashada, you know what kick it is, and if you see a tusk, you know it's a sweep. So I really enjoyed watching Mark Dacascos films. I've enjoyed seeing his return on Wu Assassins, and I hope that we keep seeing him making movies. It's fantastic. Okay, thank you.
Thanks for your recording, Ray. As you were saying, with regards to seeing the techniques in films and then later learning them, obviously it's something that I've touched on a couple of times already, but especially as I said before with Only the Strong. Growing up, as I said before, growing up in South Yorkshire in the UK, you didn't really see a lot of capoeira. It wasn't really something that was readily available. I mean, the majority of the martial arts you would see that sort of time, sort of 80s and 90s, was karate, taekwondo and judo. it was very rare you would see anything else. And so for me, when I saw capoeira, first of all, initially through videos on the internet, and then obviously later on through catching up sort of the back catalogue of Mark's work and Only the Strong in particular, it opened my eyes to the other arts that are out there, and as well, being able to study them visually, and then later on physically as well. But looking for the similarities between the different arts, certain techniques that begin and end in a certain way. They use the same biomechanics, the similar body movements, weight distribution. I'm putting my geek hat on here now, but no, it really sort of sparked my interest in looking for what else is out there, and I can trace this back, as I say, back to when I first saw these sort of movements, and as I say, initially on the internet and then later through Only the Strong, and it sort of piqued my interest to go out and look for other things. As well, obviously, you touched on Wu Assassins. Now, I have well, it's not an admission, I don't suppose. I'm just busy at the moment, but I have watched the first, I want to say 4 episodes, I believe it is. I know with Netflix, it gives you the ability to sort of binge watch things, but I find it really hard to do that. I like to sort of watch an episode, take it in, leave it a few days, watch the next one, take it in. But between running my school and obviously the podcast and the online courses and 2 different film projects I've been involved with as well, finding time to sit down and then watch this all has been really, really tricky. And what I will say, from what I've seen so far, a really fun series. By far, easily the best martial arts choreography and work for a TV show that I've ever seen. Not taking away from any of the other shows that have been mentioned earlier, or any other shows in general, but yeah, some top quality work, and obviously really clever the way that they changed between the different people. So changing obviously between Iko and Mark, very, very clever how they did that. I am going to pick it up, and I am going to watch all the other episodes and catch up. In fact, I'm going to make it a priority to do it next week. There we go. So I've committed to it on the podcast now. Okay, so the next recording we're going to go to is from Mags, one of our long-time listeners and somebody who always gets involved and sends things in. Usually sends us really, really long recordings as well, really in-depth ones I had to have to edit down. But this time around, he's managed to keep it pretty small. Okay, so we'll go over to Mags, and then I'll catch up with you on the other side of that.
Hi, sir. Hope you're well. Just wanted to jump in on the Mark Dacascos special. His acting ability and his ability to portray different martial arts styles convincingly is amazing. He's also awesome with tricks and flips, so he's a good all-rounder, and I've always enjoyed his films. I think the first film I saw with Mark Dacascos was American Samurai. It's an early 90s film. It was very, very much in the spirit of American Ninja and American Shaolin and films like that were around at the time. It was my first introduction to the samurai style and the no-nonsense sword fighting, one stroke and you're dead type stuff. It led me on to other samurai films, and it's now one of my favourite subgenres of martial arts cinema. So yeah, I've got Mark Dacascos to thank for that. More recently, Mark Dacascos popped up as a Muay Thai fighter in the Netflix series The Legend of Bruce Lee, and the fight scenes between him and Danny Chan, the guy who plays Bruce Lee, seriously worth watching. Some really cool stuff. So there's so many more films I could mention, but in the spirit of keeping it short, I think I'll leave it there. I think my record in terms of keeping it short is not 100%. So, but I'm sure you'll agree. But by my standard, this particular message is relatively short. So, thanks for the opportunity as always, and I look forward to hearing the episode.
Max, I love it. Ordinarily, I would, just as a little insider thing here, ordinarily I do sort of edit the clips down a little bit, and I had to leave that last bit in because it was brilliant. Max is one of our most enthusiastic listeners. If ever I'm at an event, and he's there with his son, who is a very, very talented martial artist in himself. They've always, they always have the T-shirt on. They always come up and say hi, get a photo, that sort of stuff, which is really humbling. It's really cool. But normally when we do a listener phone in or listener record send in, the detail that Mags goes into is just amazing. I mean, I'm a complete martial arts sort of movie geek and martial arts in general, a huge follower, but this guy knows his stuff. And as he said at the end of that clip, by his standards, that was incredibly short, but it did raise some good points, and obviously mentioned some good films there as well. And, some of which I've got, and as I know many listeners do, I've got on VHS. I'm one of those people that I just can't bring myself to get rid of VHS copies. So I'll have a VHS copy, I'll have a DVD copy, I'll have a Blu-ray copy. I don't know if that makes me a hoarder or not, but I don't know. I've said this before. Some films just seem to be better on VHS. I don't know what it is. I don't know. It's like some people say that, certain pieces of music sound better on vinyl. I just think certain films are just better on VHS, to which end, as I've mentioned before, I have 2 VHS players in my office, one that I use and one as a spare if that one breaks. I don't know if that makes me a little bit sad, but anyway, specifically for those VHS, I just think some films just better on VHS. Anyway, I digress. Let's get back onto the subject. So, the next listener we've got that sent in a recording is Simon. So I'll go over to Simon's recording and I'll come back to you on the other side.
My first movie experience with Mark Dacascos was Crying Freeman, which I saw on VHS in 1996 at my friend's house. I hadn't really seen any martial arts movies up until then, so when I finally got to see Crying Freeman, I was hooked. And I was hooked on this movie because of this guy, who could do all these incredible moves, kicks, jumps, sword fights, and I knew that I needed to start follow this guy's work and see what else he has done and what was to come. And I'm not gonna lie, part of me also really liked him because of his unusually cool last name, although I'm pretty sure I called him Mark Dacascos at first a couple of times. But and I don't know if I have any particular favorite scenes with him, as there are so many great to choose from, but I will say that the first fight scene in Brotherhood of the Wolf that introduced Mani was incredible. Especially because of the way it was shot and how the whole thing was choreographed so well, and the location was perfect for that particular fight. When I watched that scene when Mani jumps down from his horse and hear that thump when he touches the muddy ground in the rain on full blast, already then I get the chills because I know he's about to kick some serious butt. But not only is he my favorite actor because of all these great movies he's done over the last 26 years, but when I got to know him more, I also found this incredibly humble, funny, goofy, professional and grounded and very committed person. A man who loves life and always accepts a challenge with a big smile on his face and a positive attitude, and I just love that about him. He's a true inspiration to me in many, many ways. I mean, I don't train martial arts myself, but he has inspired me to always be kind and respectful to other people, never let negative things get in the way of you living a happy and fulfilling life. I got to know Mark through Facebook back in 2012. I found his page and wanted to write to him and let him know how much I have admired and how much he has inspired me ever since 1995. And I honestly didn't expect him to actually write me back, given that he's a big Hollywood movie star and probably didn't have the time for it, which I would, of course, respect. But again, like the sweet, humble and kind man that he always is, he did write me back. And as he once told me himself, life changes all the time, and I can only agree with that.
Okay, Simon. So thanks very much for your recording. What's really cool about this whole process that I found is, I've been getting recordings, obviously, of Simon from within Europe, and then earlier on in the show we had people sending recordings from as far as Australia and the United States, and it's such a cool process. But just touching a little bit on what Simon was saying there as well, there's an underlying theme that I'm noticing throughout a lot of these recordings about how much of a genuine, down-to-earth, nice guy that Mark is. What I will quickly just add though in there is obviously Simon did mention that Mark was kind enough to send him a message at one point. Please don't all jump on Facebook and start sending messages expecting replies, because obviously Mark's a very busy guy, and I'm not going to speak for him, but I know from my own personal experience with running this podcast, you can't reply to everybody all of the time. It is difficult, so just please do keep that in mind. But now, touching on the theme of people sending in recordings from all around the world, this next recording that we're going to go to is from a good friend of mine, and somebody who I must actually say a big thanks to for his involvement with certain things that have happened with this podcast. My good friend Mr. Mike Leader, who I've mentioned in previous recordings, that he's been a massive influence in my career. He actually helped me with my first job in Hong Kong and China, and he's a mutual friend, shall we say, between myself and Mark. And as I say, he did help me out with a couple of things, something of which I'm going to come to after his recording. So let's jump to Mike's recording, and I'll catch you after that.
Big fan of Mark Dacascos since I first saw him in action. In Angel Town, actually. He pops up in that as a barrio brawler. And then, of course, American Samurai, Only the Strong, Crying Freeman, of course, Drive, The Crow, Stairway to Heaven. So many cool movies. Really like Boogie Boy. It's not a martial arts movie, but it's really a dark thriller, but really good tour de force by Mark as an actor. Exceptional martial artist. Very serious about his acting too. Without sounding silly, a much better actor than a lot of people, I think, really thought of him until they saw him in John Wick 3. Exceptionally skilled, very serious into his Shakespeare. It was actually, he was in New York to do Shakespeare in the Park when he bumped into Chad Stahelski, the director of John Wick 3, and young Mr. Keanu Reeves. So, Shakespeare, study your Shakespeare, get to do martial arts movies, and kick ass. I first met Mark back in 1995. Mark was coming through Hong Kong after spending some time in China, and a mutual friend introduced us, and myself and a Australian martial arts actor and stuntman, Mike Miller, from Knock Off with Van Damme. We got to spend a couple of days hanging out with Mark. Lovely guy, very passionate about his work, very honest about his work. Doesn't walk around expecting you to kiss his ass and treat him like a star. He'd just done a little movie called Crying Freeman, and we sat in a little restaurant in Wan Chai in Hong Kong, and he acted out the whole movie for us, basically. And it was so refreshing to see someone who was so passionate about their work. Kept in contact with Mark over the years. We didn't actually see each other for 20 years. We crossed paths several times, but just timing was wrong when he was doing a China Strike Force in Shanghai, and also when he was doing the Bruce Lee TV series. We were meant to work together when Christoph Gans, who directed Crying Freeman and Brotherhood of the Wolf, was meant to do a French comic book movie in China, but that fell through. And then in 2014, we reconnected, and we ended up working together on a movie I co-wrote and co-produced called Ultimate Justice, which is kind of like a Men on a Mission movie. And Mark was fantastic. Mark came in, rocked it as an actor, rocked it as a martial artist when it came to the action. Came in with an attitude that I wish more actors would have. Really wanted to make the characters work, wanted the interaction between the team to work. And this is going to sound really strange, but it was also really nice to see someone helping people on set. This is going to sound very strange, but we had a German stuntman who had a stutter. And one day a couple of the other stunt guys were being dicks, shall we say, about the guy and his stutter. And Mark took the guy off to one side, and they were chatting, because just like Mark spent a lot of time in Germany, speaks fluent German. One of the many languages he speaks. And basically they discussed Shakespeare, and Mark told him, like, Shakespeare, you have to have this command of your voice. You can't have a weak voice to do Shakespeare. And he, went over some exercises and vocal techniques with the stuntman to help him work on his stutter. And explained how, like, James Earl Jones, the voice of CNN and Darth Vader, used to have a stutter and cured it through Shakespeare. And it was really funny because me and the stunt guy were talking, and I said, there's probably 1 million people who've learned how to throw a punch or a kick or a flip because of Mark Dacascos. But how many people got to learn Shakespeare from Mark Dacascos and work on their stutter, improving on that? So, but no, cannot say enough good things about Mark. I said, lovely guy, super respectful, just genuinely one of the nicest people in the world. And I hate a lot of people. I'm horrible. I'm very jaded. But Mark's someone I cannot say a bad word against, even if I tried. But no, lovely guy. I have nothing but the highest respect and admiration for him. Consider him a very valued friend. Great to see him back in action in a big way with John Wick 3 and also Wu Assassins. And you get to see him soon fighting my friend Brahim in The Driver, which was shot in Thailand. And hope to work with Mark on a couple of projects coming up. So fingers crossed.
A huge thanks to Mike for sending that awesome recording in and sharing with us some of his experiences working with Mike on a professional level and as a friend as well, which is one of the really nice things that I like about these podcasts. So we're focusing on an individual and their work and the impact that they've had on people, both in terms of their work and their friendship. We're getting to hear from people who are fans, from people who are friends, from people who are work colleagues, and it really helps us to get a better idea of the individual rather than getting, sometimes we can assume what people are like based on what we see of them in films and on TV, but this hopefully gives people a better idea, a more rounded opinion, shall we say, of Mark as a person, and obviously such positive stories that people are sending in. Now, just obviously towards the end of the clip there, Mike, and they said Mark then, and I actually had a joke with him about the amount of, we've had a lot of Mikes sending in recordings. I was going to mess it up and say Mike or Mark the wrong way around, and I've just done it on the last one, and I'm going to leave that in the edit too. But no, Mike was just saying there at the end with regards to the film Driver that I've actually seen some of the trailers for that on the internet, and it does look like a fun movie. But what caught my attention a little bit as well was obviously you get to see Mark working with his family. His wife and his daughter are both in this film together as well, so that would be really, really cool. And I would imagine that was a great experience for them, all working together on the same production. Being at home together and then being at work together on set as well, and hopefully, I mean, obviously I don't know, but I'm assuming that this might be the start of a career for his daughter as well in the industry, which would be really cool to have that effect. I mean, my son's shown an interest in following in my footsteps with regards to martial arts and teaching, so I know what sort of a cool experience it is to have that sort of impact and that influence as a father. But yeah, big thanks to Mike for that. Now, I did actually mention before we went into that recording that Mike had played a role in something else as well, which I'm about to share with you now. It's very, very cool thing. It's hard to put it into words really, but anyway, rather than trying to explain, I'm just going to play it and then I'll come back to you afterwards.
Hello, this is Mark Dacascos, and I would like to thank Chris Jones and the Kickback with Chris podcast and everyone who contributed to the podcast and has supported myself and my movies. Big thank you, and please know that I appreciate you. And Chris, I do look forward to meeting you in person. Big hug, virtual hug, and much aloha. Be well.
I mean, wow, how cool is that? It's as you can tell, I'm a little bit lost for words, but for me, the journey that I've gone on with this podcast has been utterly incredible. Going from the first episode just over a year ago, where I literally sat myself down in front of a computer and just spoke for about 20 minutes on subjects pertaining to the martial arts and my thoughts on certain things. And to fast forward now through to the last sort of few months, culminating in, getting an audio recording through from Mark Dacascos. I mean, wow. I mean, super thank you. Can't thank you enough for that, really. I'm going to stop babbling on now. I'm having my zero moment now. I'm having my super geek moment. But yeah, and as well, obviously, as I said before, thanks to Mike for helping orchestrate, help organise that. I really do appreciate it. And I know that our listeners will as well. And I'm looking forward to getting the messages through from people saying how cool it is for them as well. And I know that people really are going to really appreciate that. So that brings us to the end of this week's episode. I hope you've all enjoyed it. What I will just quickly add is there were several people that did actually want to send in recordings but have been otherwise taken up. They're away working on set, or they've been ill and things. So what I am actually going to do is put them into a future episode. I'll obviously put a little explanation into there as to why they're there as well, but if you were planning to send one and you couldn't send it for whatever reason, please do still send it, and I will include it in a future episode. I hope you've all enjoyed it. As always, please remember to share this around social media. You can also subscribe to us if you go to iTunes or Spotify and search for Kickback with Chris, the Martial Arts Podcast. What is super important is you remember to put a space between kick and back. It's not one word. Some people do keep putting it together, and then they can't find us. So kick, then space, Kickback with Chris, the Martial Arts Podcast. And if you could subscribe to us on there. Also, if you do use iTunes, if you could leave us a star rating and review. Not for my ego, although it is nice to read nice reviews, I'll be honest. But it's more the way that the iTunes system is set up to work is the more ratings and reviews that it sees, it sort of connects the dots so that people find us, so that people who like other martial arts podcasts and subjects similar, it sort of connects us up, and then we get to connect with more people, which enables us to make more cool episodes with this because we have more people sending in content for it. But yes, thanks, big thanks to everybody that's been involved. Without you guys sending in these clips, it's just me talking for 45 minutes, which I know some of you like, but I don't think many people would want to just hear me talking. So, joking aside, you really do help create this, and without you guys showing support, there wouldn't be a podcast. Again, thank you to Mark for sending in that recording. As always, please do remember to check out our show supporters. So we've got onlinekicking.co.uk for all your kicking tutorials and any help and advice with regards to kicking training. We've got Mittmaster.com, so www.mittmaster.com for all the awesome pad training drills. In fact, what you can do if you want to go along to our website, which is kickbackpodcast.com, at the top of there is a banner. If you click that banner for Mittmaster.com, it takes you through to their website. Any of the cool content that you buy whilst you were there, we get a little kickback, no pun intended, that helps us to support the show and obviously the various costs that are involved that go into producing this show, hosting it, etc, etc. Also, our friends over at artmartialclothing.com, if you buy any of their cool t-shirts, and those t-shirts and hoodies and stuff, they are really quite cool, I'll be honest. Some of the best stuff I've seen martial arts clothing range wise. If you head over to artmartial.com, anything that you purchase there at checkout, if you use the promo code CJ19, you can save yourself a massive 20%, which is a pretty awesome saving, I have to say, on any of their cool kit there. That promo code, I must stress, is only going to be activated until the end of this year, so you haven't got long left. We're into November now, so take advantage of it, save 20%. Maybe you want to buy a friend or a training partner or just somebody that you like, maybe just yourself. Treat yourself, you have to do that sometimes. Maybe you want to treat yourself to a cool t-shirt there. So yeah, check out our supporters, onlinekicking.co.uk, Mittmaster via our banner on our website, and of course our friends over at artmartialclothing.com. I really hope you've enjoyed this episode. I've really enjoyed the process of putting it together and connecting with all these people who I now consider new friends through social media. Big thanks to Mark as well. Also for sharing the links on your social media, Mark. That was a really cool move. And it just helps further increase our reach on our listener base, which is, I really do appreciate that you took the time to do that. Have a great day, great week, whatever it is you're doing. Keep training hard, and I'll speak to you all next time.
Brought to you by www.mittmaster.com.